Helix might wander over to see Mum, that's fine. Or Grandma, isn't it? Grandma. We get to a situation again when you want to do a garden bed. So you've got to get a good transmitter that's got a regulated power supply to do a garden bed. North and south neutralisers, the dog can walk across these two touching wires. The reason why I like the FM one is that I don't get the radio signal jumping from here into the garden bed and zapping the dog in between those zones. If he's walking around there and all of a sudden the radio signal jumps in and zaps him, he's going to get porch sitting syndrome. G'day, Colin back again, and as you met before, this is our little buddy Helix, and what we're going to talk about is a twisted pair of wires. Now we're just about to take Helix into the radio signal and train him at that gate not to go through using the collar at the low levels, which is really the key. So he's going to hear the little beepers, I don't know if you can hear that, and the correction levels on the collar, and we're going to teach him what all that means very slowly. I expect to get great results because he's a lovely dog. Now back to the subject. First of all, what we'll do is we'll talk about, Helix might wander over to see Mum, that's fine. Or Grandma, isn't it? Grandma. Okay, so if you imagine that your transmitter is a radio and that's plugged into a power point. Now we've got 3 pins on the power point and that gives you an earth pin to protect the transmitter from lightning damage, but that's a different subject. If you then have a regulated power supply, it doesn't allow the radio signal to fluctuate in distance, so that'll control how much wire comes there. And the other thing we have is a green earth wire that comes to the power plug. Now if this was a CB radio in a car, the radio signal would go up the aerial and transmit forever. And therefore you've got the radio signal going up the aerial, transmitting forever. Now, if you ran that around your whole property and back to the transmitter, the radio signal's heading in one direction. The transmitter blocks the radio signal, and when you turn up the volume or the range control, you're putting more pressure into the radio wire, and the signal's got no choice but to expand out of the wire. So that's how you control the distance of the radio signal. Of course, how much wire you've got and a little bit of what's in the ground might affect that. But what's happening here is the radio signal heads north to get to the boundary, then it goes around the property in one direction, then it heads south to get back to the transmitter. North and south will neutralise the radio signal. So if we go over to our next page, and if then the next thing to consider is that the reason why that's happening is basically north and south touching neutralises the signal. Your next question is, if I'm running a wire down one fence line and I want the dog to go through, which you probably wouldn't. You want to run the wire down the line, the dog can't get through anywhere, any gates or whatever. If you've got an access point, we can teach you in another video how to get the dog to go for a walk with you. But if you ran the wire along the fence and you had a dog's kennel here, and you wanted to neutralise the radio signal because the dog's going to live in the kennel and the radio signal is on either side of the wire, there's no way to neutralise that radio signal. And yes, this ground is very hard and my knees are not as young as they used to be. But anyway, so if you went along here and you wanted to neutralise that signal and you went across, back and then across, you've still got a positive, you've got a negative, and you've got a positive. You've still got a positive there. So you've got north, south, north, you've still got a north, so you're still going to have a radio signal there. The only way to maybe do that is to bring the wire up in the air and make sure the radio signal's not going there or go outside the property. So then we get to a situation again where you want to do a garden bed. So you've got to get a good transmitter that's got a regulated power supply to do a garden bed. If you ran the wire along here and then turned around and came back, the distance between the two wires would restrict how far, and this is just a rule of thumb. There's no sort of scientific guarantee that if that's 30 centimetres, then you'll get 30 centimetres there and 30 centimetres there. So if you're laying that in a garden bed, the ways you can restrict the distance of the radio signal is to turn down the pressure and the volume on the transmitter, or you could move those two wires a little bit closer together and that will restrict it. So if I was going around a property and I had a garden bed at the around the property like this, and I wanted to protect all these garden beds, but I had a brick wall with no garden bed there, I'd start the transmitter here, run the wire there, go all the way around the back of the fence here, and then I would turn around and I would run the wire in contour to the garden bed so the radio signal followed the contour of the garden bed. I would touch the wires together here because I don't need the radio signal there, and then I could contour the wires to follow the garden bed along there. Then if I had a fish pond in the middle of the property here, and I had fish in there that looked like that, I could then cut this wire, run a new wire to the pond, go round the pond, and then run the wire back to the boundary. The radio signal would come up along here, head north to get to the pond, go around the pond to create a radio signal around the fish pond, then head south, north and south neutralizers. The dog can walk across these two touching wires. But if you don't have a regulated power supply or a very good transmitter, if you get fluctuations in the radio signal, and the reason why I like the FM one is that I don't get the radio signal jumping from here into the garden bed and zapping the dog in between those zones. If he's walking around there and all of a sudden the radio signal jumps in and zaps him, he's going to get porch sitting syndrome. We've already mentioned porch sitting syndrome in another video. So that's how it works. But how do you twist the wires together? Don't get too excited about it. As I said, one way is you could pop them inside a drill. Here's one I prepared earlier. And you could give them a bit of a twist, just gently. You don't need to do much more than that because you can drop it in the trench and just cover the wire over. If you go too far, like that, and then you let it go, it's going to twist up and get all kinky, so you don't need to do that. Kinky is a double meaning word, isn't it? Anyway, so the only thing I do is usually when I dig a trench between the garage and the shed and I drop the wires in, I'll just make sure they're just touching each other, then I'll just cover them up with dirt. The dog can walk across the top and he won't get affected by anything. So that's twisted pairs. Very crucial. It'll help you add into your system. If you end up having a veggie patch in the middle of the property or expensive garden beds, you can always run an offshoot from your fence line. What we'll do now, we'll go and grab Helix over there, who's sitting pretty with Grandma and Granddad, and we'll go and train him on the fence. So if you want to see that, click on the link below. You'll need to fill in your details and give us some information about your dog and what's been happening, and we'll be able to help you. And you can go in and see the training section where we've got a few case studies there. All right, this is Colin signing off. That's Twisted Pairs. Really helps you, but you've got to have a good regulated power supply and you've got to have a good FM frequency to get the best results when doing that sort of thing. Our number, 1300 the dog, 1300 843 364. See you later.